Hello, juniors. I miss you guys. Well, welcome to week 12. This week we are talking about the fifth commandment. Now, last week, the fourth commandment, that was a pretty long section. Now looking back, I think we probably should have done part A and part B over a 2-week span. So, having learned my lesson, we're going to do the same thing for the fifth commandment. Not the same thing. We're going to do it the correct way. So, there will be a part A, which will be this week, and a part B, which we'll do next week. So, here we go. All right, so our Part A objectives are highlighted there in a light yellow color. And what we're going to be doing this week is we're going to explain why life is sacred. We will describe the rights and responsibilities of legitimate defense of self and others. We will identify the goal of punishment. We will name and describe examples of intentional homicide. We will summarize the church's teachings on abortion, the church's teachings on euthanasia, and the church's teachings on suicide. Okay, so I'm sure you've all heard that human life is sacred, but if you haven't thought to yourself why, here's a very simple explanation. Human life is sacred because from the beginning it involves the creative action of God, and anything that God creates is worthy of respect. So that is one of the reasons why human life is sacred. It also remains forever in a special relationship with the Creator, who is its only purpose and end. So that's a little bit more complex. So in other words, God created life so that we could be with Him. It's for our benefit, not for His. But because of original sin, we have to work a little harder to get back. So of course we know that the meaning of life, the purpose of life, the threefold purpose, is to know, love, and serve God. Our end is ultimately God and nothing else. You can't take anything in your life with you. You can't take your money. You can't take your career. You really can't take people or pets or hobbies. You can't take that with you. The only thing in the end of your life that matters is God. So that's what we mean here when we say its only purpose and end. That is not to say that there are not goods in each of those other things. Having a good career, making money that you can have a good life with and share that goodness with others, having great relationships with your family, those things are very important. But at the end of the day, your life belongs to God. Okay, so let's get a little biblical foundation here. So, just in case you missed the title slide, the fifth commandment is, you shall not kill. In the Bible, we first witness murder in the story of Cain and Abel. So Cain and Abel reveals the presence of anger and envy in man and as consequences of original sin. The deliberate murder of an innocent person is gravely contrary to the dignity of the human being and to holiness. This law is universal, so it doesn't matter if you're a Catholic, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, it does not matter. This is built into our very fiber. It's inherent. So every person is bound to follow this law. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus recalls the commandment, you shall not kill, but he also adds to it the prescriptions of anger, hatred, and vengeance. So not only can we not literally kill somebody by ending their life, we cannot be angry, we cannot hate, and we cannot be vengeful. Those are all different types of killing. So we have to use a little extended reasoning here. So I want you to think about, what would anger kill? What would hatred kill? What would vengeance kill? So I want that to be your thought bubble for this week. And when we come back together next week, I'd like to address this question. Legitimate defense. Okay, this little window is kind of bugging me here. All right. The act of self-defense can have a double effect. You've heard that phrase before. That's the preservation of one's own life and the killing of the aggressor. One is intended, the other is not. So in the case of double effect, if you had to kill someone out of self-defense, the intention is not to kill an aggressor, it's to defend your life. However, the ending of the aggressor's life is a consequence of what you intended to be the outcome. It is legitimate to insist on respect for one's own right to life. We have an obligation to take care of ourselves and to preserve our own life. Someone who defends his life is not guilty of murder, even if he is forced to deal his aggressor a lethal blow. Legitimate defense can be not only a right, but a grave duty for one who is responsible for the lives of others. So think about this. Who in your life do you know to be responsible for others? Your parents are absolutely responsible for your health and safety. So if an intruder were to come into your house and attempt to use lethal force or to harm people, Your parents not only have a right to defend them violently if necessary, they have an obligation to do so. Not necessarily violently, but they have an obligation to protect others. So, in the case of murdering an intruder, you would not be necessarily culpable for a mortal sin because you fall under the principle of double effect. The intention would be to protect the innocent, not to harm someone. All right, let's transition here into punishment. Punishment has a purpose, and I know not everybody who punishes does so correctly, and there is a right and a wrong way to do it. Since the state is responsible for the protection of the common good, efforts to curb the spread of harmful behavior to people's rights and to the basic rules of civil society are legitimate. What this is saying is not only do your parents have an opportunity or an obligation to punish you, the state has an obligation to punish people who violate what basic human rights would be. Excuse me, I got something caught in my throat. But all punishment inflicted by authority must be proportionate to the gravity of the offense. So you can't shoot a man for stealing a pack of bubble gum from a liquor store. It's not proportionate. So the punishment has to fit the crime. When it's willingly accepted by the guilty party, it assumes the value of expiation. If you recall what expiation is, it's the repayment for the sins committed. It's what is owed to the person that you sinned against, and what is owed to God. So when a person is punished and they accept that punishment fully willingly, they recognize that they did wrong and they want to make amends for it, then that has a medicinal impact, which is something we'll look at in the next bullet point. It helps to heal the guilty party. So, in addition to defending public order and protecting people's safety, punishment must contribute to the correction of the person who's guilty. And that's what we call medicinal. It acts as medicine. Intentional homicide. Any type of direct and intentional killing is gravely sinful. There's no two ways about that. But these particular forms are particularly bad. Infanticide, fratricide, and parricide. Infanticide is the killing of a child, fratricide is the killing of a sibling, and parricide is the murder of a parent and the murder of a spouse. These are especially grave crimes because of the natural bonds which they break. So we should naturally have a great love for each of these people in our lives, whether they be our children, our siblings, our parents, or our spouse. There are bonds there that are very real. And so if we violate those by murder, then we've committed an especially grave sin. It is never permissible to intentionally do something to someone to indirectly bring about their death. So what does that mean? That could be exposing someone to mortal danger without a serious reason, and it means refusing assistance to someone who is in serious danger. So these would all fall under the category of intentional homicide. All right, abortion. Now, many of you, having taken my class for 2 years at least, have a very strong idea of what the church's teachings on abortion are. But let's get it from the catechism. From the first moment of his existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person. Formal cooperation in an abortion constitutes a grave offense under the canonical penalty of excommunication. So first of all, let's square away what formal cooperation means. For instance, if a friend were considering abortion and she asked you to drive her to the clinic, if you gave her that ride, you also would be guilty of the grave offense of abortion under the canonical penalty of excommunication. So I don't know if you're familiar with that term yet, but excommunication is a medicinal, spiritual penalty that deprives the guilty Christian of all participation in the common blessings of ecclesiastical society. So in other words, excommunication is done for the purpose of healing the person who has committed the sin, and the penalty is that they are no longer permitted to receive the sacraments or be part of the Catholic community in a formal way. Really important to recognize that the purpose of excommunication is not vengeance. It's meant to awaken an individual's conscience to repentance. It also serves, if it's done publicly, as an example to the community of how serious some sins really are. So, and there are quite a few sins that you can be excommunicated for, but since we're talking about abortion, that's why it came up here. Since it must be treated from conception as a person, obviously we're talking about babies, the embryo must be defended in its integrity, cared for, and healed as far as possible, like any other human being. Euthanasia. Euthanasia is defined as an act or omission, means something you don't do that you should have done. It's an act or omission of itself or by intention causes a death in order to eliminate suffering. So to deliberately kill someone either by a specific action or by neglecting to do an obligated action that causes somebody's death to eliminate their suffering. Those whose lives are diminished or weakened deserve special respect. The sick or handicapped persons should be helped to lead lives as normal as possible. So, no matter what the intentions, whatever its motives and means, direct euthanasia consists in putting an end to the lives of handicapped, sick, or dying persons, and it is morally unacceptable in all cases. So, what euthanasia is not. Discontinuing medical procedures that are burdensome, dangerous, extraordinary, or disproportionate to the expected outcome can be legitimate. This would not be the same thing as helping someone end their life. This is a refusal of overzealous treatments. So we are not called upon to move heaven and earth to try and save somebody's life. If a doctor is telling us that there's almost no chance that this person will recover, you're not obligated to keep somebody, you're not obligated to give extraordinary treatments that are either burdensome financially or physically on the person. You are not obligated to do those things. In this case, you're simply letting nature take its course. This person is going to die either way. So what you can't do is deny them the ordinary care that every person is entitled to. So you can't remove feeding tubes. You can't starve a person to death. So let's just look at this last point. However, even if death is thought to be imminent, the ordinary care owed to a sick person cannot be legitimately interrupted. All right, and finally, suicide. The basis of the church's teachings on suicide is that God is the master of life. We are obliged to accept life gratefully and to preserve it. We are stewards, not owners, of the life that God has entrusted to us. Remember, if God is the master of life, then what we have, we owe all to God. We are here temporarily, so we are stewards. That means caretakers of the life that God has given to us. So our life is not ours to dispose of. Suicide is contrary to the love of self, and it is contrary to the love of neighbor, because it unjustly breaks the ties of solidarity with all of the people who are considered our neighbors, such as family, nation, and other human societies to which we continue to have obligations. If suicide is committed with the intention of setting an example, especially to the young, it also takes on the gravity of scandal. Scandal is something that we will focus on next week. Grave psychological disturbances, anguish, or grave fear of hardship, suffering, or torture can diminish the responsibility of the one committing suicide. So, take for instance 9/11. As the planes were crashing into the Twin Towers, many people were terrified. And so, out of fear, they jumped from very high heights and died. So, effectively, presumably, they knew that they were going to end their own life. This is the kind of extenuating circumstance that would significantly diminish somebody's responsibility or culpability in terms of being a mortal sin. Because when we're facing great fear, we're not using all of our faculties. We're not in complete control of our choices in those moments sometimes. So we can take a little heart there. We should not despair of the eternal salvation of persons who have taken their own lives. By ways known to God alone, He can provide opportunity for repentance for these people. So it's not up to us to despair or fret over that person's salvation. But to that end, we must pray for the souls of those who have taken their own lives, because they do need our prayers. And that concludes this week's lesson. If you have any questions, please send me an email. My office hours will be Monday morning and Friday afternoon this week, and I really look forward to being with you all again. So please take care. Bye-bye.